For so many of us, we're born into a faith, usually the faith of our parents. So we're not in a position to necessarily explore things. But unfortunately, too many faiths have an exclusivity about them that is part of their own philosophy. You were born this, and you better not leave this, because if you do, you're going to be going down the wrong path.
Hi, I'm Angélique Letizia, a writer, director, and creator of the Call Cut Method. It's a tool to shift your frequency, rewrite your inner script, and realign you with the energy of your highest potential. This podcast is your behind-the-scenes pass to alchemizing that energy. So if you're ready to interrupt the script, reclaim your power, and write your story that you were actually born to live, you're in the right place. My guest today is Reverend Dr. John Yoegel, an ordained interfaith minister from the new Seminary for Interfaith Studies, the oldest interfaith seminary in the world, and a former dean who helped shape its legacy. He serves as a priest in the Orthodox Catholic Church of America, where tradition meets inclusion. Dr. Yoegel is also an author, from real estate licensing exams for dummies to A Christmas Promise and his upcoming book, I Am God and So Are You. Dr. Yoegel is a seeker and storyteller who invites us to awaken the sacred power within. I'm very excited about this guest because, yes, his name is John Yoegel, except I refer to him as Dad. So, Dad, welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you here. And today I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your experience in the spiritual world, because we have, aside from having a lot of things in common, even though you being my stepfather, one of the things we definitely come together on is spirituality and religion and all these different philosophies and esotericism and occult mysticism. And we have the most wild and incredible conversations. And I thought that it would be cool to capture it and bring it here. And before we get to that point, I want to let the audience know that one of the reasons that we can do this is because you are an interfaith minister. So you have a wealth of information and a body of knowledge, far beyond my own. And I think your perspective is so interesting because it's not holed into one ideology. Maybe can you tell the audience how you got into that?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I noticed that you didn't tell the audience that the other thing we share is things like the taste of ice cream that we like
Yeah.
when we're not discussing spiritual matters. That's okay. Yeah, the real quick summary of my own journey to where I am now. I was born and raised a Roman Catholic with a full-on 16 years of Catholic school education. Um, as with many people, I drifted away, and at some point, after a number of years, I found myself called, for lack of a better term, to the ministry. And I certainly wasn't going to become a Catholic priest, nor did any other particular religion suit me to become a minister. I, of course, was married, had a family, so the Roman Catholic priesthood was out anyway. And I explored and found the interfaith ministry. I attended the oldest actually the first interfaith seminary in the world, the new Seminary for Interfaith Studies in New York City, and was ordained after 2 years of study an interfaith minister. Um, as with many people that I was both in class with and then later on taught, because I taught at the seminary for a few years, um, we we wanted more. We wanted something not different, but something supplemental. And I did some further exploration, and I found what is called the independent, it's got several names, but it's usually called the independent Catholic or independent sacramental movement. These are what might be called Catholic or Protestant churches that have, or groups that have broken away from the mainstream. So after, again, a couple of years of study at a seminary type program, I became ordained as a Catholic priest in the Orthodox Catholic Church of America. And that kind of brings me to where I am now in terms of just my own spiritual journey. Still exploring, by the way.
Right. And one of the things we've talked about is that piece of it, the word you said right there, journey, that it can evolve and it can change. You said at the top of this conversation that you started out as Catholic. And over time, you have now, moved into this interfaith ministry, which embodies a lot of different theologies. If anyone could see your bookshelf and my bookshelf, which, my bookshelf is suffocating your bookshelf right now. But it's all different philosophies and religions and practices. And I think one of the things people don't really know, for me, I'm Buddhist, which is not technically a religion, but a practice. And I feel people have a lot of misinformation about religions and certain theologies because they don't really understand them past a very, very small and limited perspective. Would
Mhm.
you agree with that?
I do. I think people are, um for so many of us, we're born into a faith, usually the faith of our parents. So we're not in a position to necessarily explore things. And unfortunately, too many faiths, without singling anybody out, but unfortunately, too many faiths have an exclusivity about them that is part of their own philosophy. You were born this, and you better not leave this because if you do, you're going to be going down the wrong path, and that's very alien. Especially you mentioned Buddhism, and as you know, I have the same interest you do. That's been a calling in terms of study, and especially with the Eastern religions, they've been very foreign to they are foreign, but they've been very, very foreign to us here in the United States. So yeah, I think people something that I found in talking to younger people is that many of them were not born, unlike myself and you, were not born and raised in a particular faith, and they're kind of all over the place. They're some of them are just taking it as I don't need religion and I'm just moving ahead. Some of them find their spirituality in some interesting places. Nature, particularly, seems to be a big calling. And some are, especially interestingly enough, when they have kids, they start to explore religion and churches as an effort to be part of a community and to kind of bring their kids up in something specific.
Oh, there's so much I want to get into based on what you just said. Um, okay, let me just go to the mother nature part first, because
Mhm.
that's the part I just went honed in on.
Sure.
So that is where I am actually finding myself going into the more nature, the goddess of the earth, going back to earth based sort of philosophies, thoughts, and connections, right? The understand of like, as within, so without, we are connected to the earth
Mhm.
and conduits for the earth. And it's funny in my book, Blackout, and you are also an author, which we said at the top of this. um, One of the key connections with the main character is the connection with Mother Earth, where her emotions are connected to the great earth. And every time she has a different emotion, the weather changes, right? But I
Mhm.
believe that we actually do have that level of connection with the earth. And there are pundits that it's funny you brought up some of the Eastern religions, especially Hinduism. There are pundits that will actually say the goddess energy, the female energy, that mother energy, you can, when you tap into it, control things like weather and be very much in communion with nature in a way that we aren't necessarily taught through a more traditional religion, etc. Um, the second thing that you said that was interesting is about people, younger generations especially, either finding their way towards some sort of spirituality, but not necessarily religion.
Mhm.
which for me, I find is interesting. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this because there is an element of religion that is rooted in control, right? And con- certain um, aspects of it, I would say, not necessarily all. The benefit is that the information gets to a vast number of people in different ways that, relate to them, right? So Islam, Christianity, Judaism, etc. All these different people have something different that they can connect to. And yet there's a lot of similarities with those religions. There's many different through lines. A lot of the stories almost feel like they're repeating themselves in these books with different characters and different names and maybe different situations, but similar themes. So, would you say that somebody who's on this spiritual journey needs to have that religion, or do you find that these in seeking of a spirituality or a spiritual nature or kind of figuring out this godlike energy and how it applies to us is a very personal journey that doesn't necessarily have the confines either way?
Well, you've floated 2 things. So I wanna go back to the nature,
Yeah.
uh, piece before I answer this question. Coincidentally, recently, I've been delving a little more into Celtic spirituality, which is very nature-based, especially Druidism, which interestingly enough is very hard to research. There's very little historical record of that. Um, my own my own thinking is that many religions, or I shouldn't say many religions. Let's say the basic of a religion came from not understanding nature. So we worship the sun because we don't understand the sun. We relate ourselves to the earth and the changing seasons because we don't understand them so much from a scientific point of view. And, somebody in my my own I always said the early priest, that was a pretty good gig because if you if you paid attention and you were the guy or the woman who figured out when the eclipse was gonna be because you watched it previously, well, then you got to be the prophet and the predictor of the eclipse, and people provided you with shelter and food because you had all these this and it really was a matter of knowledge that did it. But it's interesting to see that we seem to be coming back to that. In fact, there's a whole branch of Christian thought called creation spirituality, which is in fact based on the idea of primarily of God as creator, Christ, Jesus as the created. I mean, it gets a lot more involved than we have time for right here, but there is that much greater relationship. Some of it, I think, came out of the ecology movement that wanted people to pay attention to, as you say, Mother Earth in however you want to relate to it. The advance of feminism, which elevated the whole goddess mentality. The Da Vinci Code probably did more for goddesses and religion from the feminist side than preachers or any of us have been able to do since, or I should say before. Um, so that's I just wanted to address that a little bit. Now, your other question is an interesting one because uh, I've written stuff and thought about this a lot. And for one thing, there's not a lot out there in my mind that's new. It may be unknown to people. I mean, Buddhism is not new. Buddhism is 600 or 700 years older than Christianity. But of course, there's many, many people that don't know it, that don't understand it, that don't have not delved into it. So, my own feeling is that we can explore, or if we're on a journey, we can and should explore what other religions, and when I say other than perhaps the religion we were born to, what other religions tell us, what other religions have to provide. what other religions feel comfortable. Resonate is a word I used a lot. What resonates with you? I look at stuff in various faiths, and it doesn't do it for me. It's not where I want to go. Um, mostly, it's not about beliefs. It's probably more about ritual and practice. Um, I love meditation, which is a Catholic Christian thing. I mean, Christians have been meditating for a long time, but we associate meditation more with Eastern religions since the 50s or 1950s, 1960s. But I'm a bad meditator, and I fully well admit that. Um, but I like meditation, and I understand the value of meditation, just as an example. So I think there's stuff out there. Uh, but I will tell you that in the end, there is a quote which I used to have on my bulletin board. Now it's still in my file someplace, which I've quoted many, many, many times to people by uh, Swami Satchidananda, and I will paraphrase it. And it says, "A religion starts. Eventually, some people in that religion begin to question. The questions become more coherent. The questioners become a cult within the religion, and eventually they leave the religion, and guess what? They form another religion." And here's the banger of that quote. "And in the end, each of us will create our own religion," if that
Mm.
goes on long enough. So I don't know if that answers your question, as much as I could go on and on. So
No, no, it does answer my question. I think that well, there's so many interesting things there. Um, the idea of us having our own religion is maybe the idea that we understand within us is the same divine spark that is without us. Many people going on that spiritual journey or trying to find themselves, whether they're doing it through religion or practice or meditation, are looking for something that calling that is coming through them, and they are finding the knowledge in different places, right?
Mhm.
But one of the things that I've noticed on my journey is there are patterns and parallels, and it's almost like the same information has been planted in all of these different places for us to find, the seeker to come and find. And when we allow ourselves to open up to the journey and not maybe be locked into the confines of societal, parental, etc. upbringings, we start to expand our knowledge, we start to expand our understanding of the universe and the cosmos, because even something like the Bible, it's it, it's not to be read literally. It is in parable, it is in metaphor. You do have to have an understanding of mathematics, geometry, astrology, astronomy, etc. in order to properly interpret those things, through the vessel without the literal translation, because none of these things were ever translated literally, right? Or they shouldn't be taken in literally. And so many people do. Uh, Years and years before the printing press, only adepts had access to esoteric texts and knowledge because they had to be trained. They had to understand all of these things, right? You had to go to this schooling in order to understand these things that you are teaching and preaching and talking about. And so I don't think it's a very simple uh journey. I feel like it's a deep, worthwhile journey that so many of us are on, but we should, well, I don't want to use the word should, but it would be good to almost take it even more seriously than anything else that we do, because a lot of our understanding of ourselves and the human origin story comes from these other stories that have been left behind. But they've pieces of it have been left behind in all different areas, almost like a puzzle that we then have to piece together through our own intuition and our own vessel in order to see, like, what is that truth for you.
well, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you ended what you were saying with that, to understand it for you. Because I mean, first of all, people like you and I, because we've made a certain choice in our lives to pursue certain knowledge and to pursue it, in fact, as a career, um, most people don't have that luxury. Most people are just really trying to get through tomorrow and figuring out how to do it as a good and decent and kind person. And religion has helped that to some degree through the years. It's also hurt it, but we can get into that's a whole nother conversation too. Um, I think giving people the basic tools. Tool number one is being able to read for most of us, and whether audiobooks for those sightless people or whatever. Um, the brain, the creationism talks about, what's the phrase that's used in one of our liturgies? The gift of reflective reasoning. I love that phrase, the reflective reasoning, to be able to look at something and read it. Um, the We need to be cautious, and I and if and you know this, this is not what you said, but we need to be cautious about what other people tell us what something means. That to me is a doorway that opens. It's not a doorway that's 'cause it's not a room that you go in and close the door behind you, okay? When I preach in church, in my sermons, I can look at something this year, and I can look at the same passage in a year or 2 and come up with a whole different sermon on it, a different
Yeah.
interpretation, it depends on what happened to me yesterday, depends on my level of maturity, it depends on a memory that might flash back. I mean, it depends on so many things. Um, I do believe the Holy Spirit is at work in those inspirational moments, but whatever the case. Uh so I think it's a doorway we give people, and again, it's that resonance that we and I say we, people like you and me who work at this, uh, to say, think about this." Now, if I may, I would like to address the you've brought it up twice now, uh, this issue of bits and pieces in each religion that forms a commonality, okay? Um, when I was at seminary, the Interfaith Seminary, first one. Um, our One of our directors there, one of our deans, used to say that the core of interfaith studies is to recognize a the common spiritual element, and I'm paraphrasing what she said, the common spiritual element that exists in all religions. And that's okay. That's what I would call reductionist, and then there were people and then I will share that there were people every class at the seminary had 1 or 2 people who decided we should have an interfaith religion. And I kinda debated that with somebody one time, and basically I said, "Well, an interfaith religion, I'd have to respect you, so, we're not gonna eat pork," right? That's a Jewish and Islamic, prohibition, and we're gonna go to confession once a year, that's a Catholic, provision, and so forth and so on, to the point where either nobody would join or the religion would be so reduced as to be meaningless. So that was never the idea behind interfaith, to create an interfaith religion, and I like to be able to point that out because w when I've described interfaith studies to people, I've gotten that question so many times that, "Oh, you mean you're forming an interfaith religion?" And no, that's the furthest thing. But it is exactly what you said. It's touching different pieces, different pieces of faith, different pieces of religion. Um, and I would add one thing, and again, I'm reflecting on the question and how you phrased it. Uh, the box that we get into, and it's usually with our birth religion, are the rules and the rituals. The dabbling, and there's nothing wrong with dabbling, the search that we're on in my opinion, needs to kind of ignore that, and it needs to get back to what the, uh, founders, what the leaders, what the prophets, whatever phrase you wanna use, of those religions have said in the first place. Um, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, I don't belong to the Roman Catholic Church, but I belong to the Orthodox Catholic Church of America, and, I study the New Testament a lot, and I have yet to find an awful lot of rules of all Christian major denominations, Catholic, Protestant, Episcopal, whatever. I've yet to find those rules in the New Testament writings, or sayings of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. Well, there's a bunch of things, but since we ended with Jesus, I will just go on to that. I find a lot of people quote Jesus, but they don't practice his teachings.
Hmm,
So people have gotten really good at throwing the Bible at you or throwing a passage at you, but not really living that in their own lives, which is, again, maybe it's something that needs to be taught or maybe further explained that we don't weaponize religious texts against anyone who thinks differently than we do. We use those texts in order to search within and find the connection to something higher
mhm.
than what we are perceiving, right? The other thing that I thought was super interesting that you said was ah man, hold on. My brain just oh, I'm back. My bra it came back online. It's been doing that a lot. It's like goes off for a second and I'm like, Where am I?" The reading of something, interpreting it one way, coming back to it and having a completely and wildly different interpretation.
Mhm,
So I had that experience with the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, where I first got it in my 20s from some gentleman in the East West bookstore who saw my scar on the top of my head, my chickenpox scar, and he was going like this. And he's like, "You're one of us. You're one of us." And I'm thinking, one of who? And in New York City, your brain starts going through a million things like, one of who, what, where did you find me? But for some reason, unbeknownst to myself, I bought it. And he wasn't the author or anything like that. I've gotten trapped in that where an author will approach me,
mhm.
but he wasn't. He was legitimately trying to get me to read this. I took it home, and at 25, I opened it and I said, "What the hell is this?" Like I could not make sense of it. Up, down, left, right. I thought, "Oh man, Angelique, what have you done? Like you're not going to be able to understand this." But something inside of me said, don't do anything about it. Just put it on your bookshelf along with all the other books that you've gotten, don't understand, and will eventually read, and just let it be there. Well, fast forward at, at the age of 42, right? Almost 20 years later, when I am researching Blackout and I'm reading all these different books and I've been going through all of this different sort of transformation in my spiritual journey, I end up meeting this woman again, crystal shop. I meet these randos in a bunch of different places, but maybe angels in disguise. And she starts to talk about the emerald tablets. And she said, "Oh, you have a connection to the emerald tablets." And she was talking about all this stuff she saw in my energy field. So I went back and pulled it off the shelf. And I said, "Oh, let me see." And man, all of a sudden, it was like my brain could put together what it was talking about. I understood all these different concepts. I was translating it in the side, the margin, and I couldn't believe the connection I had to it 20 years later after having gone through all of these other experiences. So I am a firm believer in that you can read something and not quite understand it or perhaps understand it a certain way, and then as your own evolution unfolds, have a wildly different perspective on it.
Can I share a
Years
story with
later.
you about that? I know you've heard of the Buddhist saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will come, the
Yeah.
teacher will appear. What people sometimes who say that don't realize is that teacher could be a book, an author, a movie, it could be a lot of things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the long-term guru relationship where you kind of assign yourself to somebody for 15 years or whatever it might be. It could be a one-time thing, like a book or a movie or something like that that inspires you. But I bought a book at a book sale a number of years ago. I've lost track of the timeline on it. Called "The Coming of the Cosmic Christ" by Matthew Fox, who's a pretty well-known guy in uh, creation spirituality circles. And uh, I bought it at a sale, and I with a whole bunch of other books, put it on the bookshelf. Eventually got around to saying, "I think I should read this." Picked it up, got to maybe page 8, 9, put it back. Couldn't fathom it. That happened 3 times before on the 3rd time, I picked it up and didn't put it down until I finished it. The first 2 go-rounds, it didn't re again, I'll use that word resonate. It didn't resonate with me. I kinda didn't understand what he was trying to say, and quickly got just, I don't wanna waste my time on something. I'm just reading words that aren't making sense. So, yes, totally agree with you in terms of, um one of my ambitions, I do a lot of underlining in these books and all of that, is now to go back, not that I've stopped reading new stuff, because there's new stuff coming out all the time, but is to go back and review a lot of the underlinings and see what they evoke in me now in terms of, thoughts.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting things, I guess, along those lines when you underline stuff and you're highlighting things and you're looking at certain books, magazines, etc. Whatever it is that you're wherever it is that you find your wisdom. When we go back, we do often take the information in differently because I feel that, and I've said this a million times, intellect and intuition, that marriage is wisdom. And we don't necessarily come to the table with wisdom. We come to the table with intellect. So we have the capacity to take information in, right? Dissect it, etc. But we're not quite doing it through our intuition yet. I feel like the gift of maybe age or time is the ability, and that's why the word resonates is so important that you keep saying that. The ability to take that information in through your intuition, seeing if it lands and it resonates with you and your journey and what you're here to learn. And I feel this is why it's also important for us to understand and have compassion for everybody's spiritual journey. We're not here to try to inject our thoughts. We're not here to try to force somebody to do it our way because I feel we don't really know what the way is. We have a couple of guideposts in terms of these books and these religions and these ideas, etc., but nobody really knows for sure. You know, it's all of us kind of trying to converge, and I feel like when we get to a point where we understand that by unifying our consciousness and by unifying our then cosmic intelligence, that's when the pieces of the puzzle start to, come together, and this grand kind of tapestry of the human origin story reveals itself. But if we stay separated, whether it's through religious separation, race,
Mhm.
sex, whatever it is, we never get to that beautiful part of the journey where we can take in all these different little billions of perspectives and put it on this almost blanket manuscript and say, what
Mm.
is our story?
Getting back to, we've talked about or used the word religion a couple of dozen times in this conversation so far. Uh, and I do want to address that because I had occasion to write something where I needed to define religion. And mostly I disagree with the standard, Webster kind of definition because that definition usually involves rules and rituals and moral codes and all of that. And for me, uh, I pretty much defined it as our own belief or system, if you want to call it a system, of relating to, um, I call it God. Some might call it the creation spirit. Some might call it the your base of all knowledge. I mean, you could come up with 1,099 names, as the Muslims say. But basically, how you relate to that entity, that being, that energy, and how you relate to each other. That's it. To me, creating, and that's why we get back to creating your own religion if you need to. But to me, that's the essence of every religion. I don't need to know. I don't particularly. Rituals are interesting. It's great to see how different religions worship and practice their liturgies and all of that. But in the end, I need to know, for me, how do I relate to God, right? And again, we can use that phrase. Other people can use a different phrase. How do I relate to God, and how should I relate to you? And if I look at every religion to try to get down to the root of that, I think that's where you will find, as you say, a commonality among most, if not all faiths.
I agree, actually. And what's interesting is your upcoming book, you really kind of go into this idea that, and if you don't mind me saying the title, it is I Am God and So Are You.
Mhm,
And this idea that we are all, you know, part of that bigger source and that
mhm,
grand primordial essence, if you will, and how that relates, and the coming home to this idea that we are not powerless, we are not necessary, we don't necessarily need to look outside of ourselves for the answers that we are seeking because it is within. And I believe, and you would know this way more than I, Jesus said this many times in many different ways, over and over and over again. I know Toth said it over and over and over again. There have been many different, the Buddha, everything is mind, and everything is that is the creation of the mind, etc. And this idea that our imagination, when tapped into that ether realm where this, source energy is,
mhm,
creates everything around us. And so if we know that we're not just victims, but we are co-creators
mhm. Right.
with that energy,
Good word. Yep.
uh, right? We can come to a very different level. Maybe this is a little bit naive, of peace
Mhm.
on earth, or heaven on earth, if you will, because we're no longer seeking outside of ourselves. We don't feel that we have to take something away from someone else.
Mhm.
Envy, jealousy, shame, guilt, power, greed, all of those lower vibrational energies cease to exist when we understand who we truly are.
Right. It's coincidental. I'm in the midst right now of working with a couple of other uh, clergy and non-clergy in programming a retreat that we're going to do next summer, well, next spring, for both clergy and non-clergy within the Orthodox Catholic Church that I'm a member of. And the title that we wanted to develop a theme around which to create all of the programmatic elements, but the title of it, or the theme of it, is the inner journey. And the idea, and the folks on the committee have talked about this in different ways. The idea is we don't want to bring these people together for well, what are you doing in your ministry? And what are your suggestions for building a church? And how are you dealing with your community? That's something else. That's important stuff. But that's not the purpose of this particular retreat. The purpose of this particular retreat is to help people get back to that inner journey, with the idea that, in a way, the more time you spend on your inner journey, the more you're going to be able to relate on the outer journey. That is the association with other people and the planet and the universe. How you're going to be able to do that in a more uh, wise, to use the word wisdom, right? To use more wisdom in those external relationships. For our folks, it's basically take these 3 or 4 days retreat, come with us on this inner journey, because we hope it will then make you a better priest. So the idea and that journey continues. I'm certainly old enough to, and if I had to write a spiritual biography and mark things along the way, I would certainly not be at the end of the road. I still, as I said before, I can still read a passage and get a new inspiration or get a new idea that just came from wherever these things come from, that I didn't have before, or a new interpretation of something, or something I read which triggers something else. So many books, so little time to read,
Whew.
as you know.
Yeah.
That's the other
Or
thing.
or as my husband says, "Are the books that you have and haven't read jealous of the new books that you bought and haven't read?"
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, because
I tried with very little success because I've always bought more books than I ever would have time to read, which you know from the shape of my library. But I've tried with very little success a technique that didn't work in college, and that is buy the book, put it on the shelf, and somehow by osmosis you'll pick it up. The knowledge doesn't work.
I'm
You gotta
sure I'm
read it at
sure,
some point.
yeah, I'm sure Elon Musk is working on that one.
Yeah.
But I do think that I do think, though, that we do end up picking those books up.
Mhm.
I feel sometimes, and I know you feel this too, when you're in the bookstore or wherever you get these books
Uh-huh.
and you're drawn to a particular book and you take it and you know dang well you're probably not going to read it right away, but you know you need it for
Mhm.
something.
Mhm.
There's a reason. I all these books that I had acquired in my 20s and 30s, and I really unraveled them in my 40s when I was doing all this stuff for Blackout. All of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh, I need a book on this. Oh my god, I have a book on this. Oh, I don't know what that is, and I have to Google it." I was like, "You don't have to Google anything. It's right in that book that you didn't read that you bought, 15 years ago." So,
Did you ever
I do
buy the
think this.
Did you ever buy the same book that you already owned?
Yeah, and then I just give one of the copies away.
I've done that a couple of times.
Or you know what's funny? I'll swear I'll be in the bookstore and I'll be like, "Oh, I need this, but man, it looks familiar." And I'll swear it looks familiar, but I will convince myself that at the time I thought I knew it or saw it, I didn't do anything about it. I will bring it back, and one day I will be going through stuff and I'll be like, "Oh, for the love of damn it, there it is."
I was for a long time, I was probably more of a buffet buyer than anything else. I would love to go to on one of the jobs I had, they had a really nice library, pretty big library, and twice a year, they would have, major book sales. I mean, the entire first floor of the library was taken over with tables of books, and, of course, I'd head for the spiritual or philosophy books, right, or religion right away. And, and they were not, a quarter, 50 cents. I mean, really, really a bargain. And I'd buy them by the armful. I'd look through them. I mean, but I'd buy them by the armful on the theory that, and it always worked, that probably half of them would be worth reading. And the other half, well, maybe dabbling a little or whatever. But, it was easier than trying to sit there one by one and read, figure it out. And it was cheap enough to do so. Hence my
And sometimes,
groaning bookcases.
yeah. And sometimes there's just a piece
Yeah.
of that information that
Mhm.
you need. And, nowadays, obviously, with the internet and et cetera, we can get that information without having to buy a whole book, but sometimes no. And we do need that entire book in
Mhm.
order to get that little piece of knowledge. And I always I like the smell of books. I like the feel of them. I'm not really good with the digital.
Hmm.
I know that there's a convenience there, but it's a convenience that doesn't seem to
No, I'm
register
still
with
a yeah,
mine.
I agree. I'm still uh, a paper person.
Book.
So, yeah, I think there's a
Yeah.
tactile relationship
Yeah, and
to be
and
able
you
to
said it earlier,
hold it.
and we also yeah, you said it earlier, and we also have this in common, the underlining
Mhm.
and the highlighting and the writing. Like, you know that I've read a book because when you open that thing, you're like, "Oh, she was here."
Yeah,
Like, there's
yeah.
there's no question. She was here.
Well, it's a
Certain
reminder
ones.
for me too. I mean, I will very often pick up a book, that I say, "Oh, I have to read that," and then open it up and immediately know that I did read it already.
Right.
You know, I mean, of course, it's pretty quick then to get into the notes and all that, but yeah, and I would certainly recommend that to people as again, I we're 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 talking around you and I are right this minute talking around something that I also find some in fact, I read something just recently, just the other day about this, but almost a controversy, or at least a disagreement in the spiritual journey fields, and that is this idea of intellect versus, um, what would you call it? Intellect versus intuition, or intellect versus feeling? Um and I don't think they're mutually exclusive. If you look at the various ways of learning, of spiritual development, there are people who do it through action, there are people who do it through prayer, and there are people who do it through, what I would call intellect, through study. And I think the ideal situation is to be totally that, is to use all of those elements again on this spiritual journey of trying to figure out, and what are we trying to figure out? We're trying to figure out who we are and what we need to be doing. Well, I don't even like the word need, because again, that imposes something on us. But what we should be doing, which is a little different than need, what we should be doing here, on the planet without guilt. I that's a whole other conversation too, but without guilt, without feeling of obligation. I know what makes me happy, and it's not necessarily sitting around, and happiness is a big I had a poster on my bulletin board for a long time that said, "Happiness is the point of everything." And 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 I bring that up because if you think about it, and again, you and I have had these conversations offline about this, we're not talking about the next biggest house. We're not talking about the next biggest whatever. What really makes you happy? Family, friends, uh, a hobby, co-creating. Why do people love gardening? Because we are co-creating with the creator, right? Finding those things, and I know we're kind of all over the place, but that's part of the fun of this journey, is to kinda look at all these things and really examine, really ask the hard questions. I just picked up a book, by the way, from the library, which I bought a while ago, and I'm thinking of using on the retreat, called Questions for the Soul. So,
Ah,
yeah.
well, I tend to agree, and I will say there is a lot of argument, and I've heard this in and even in some circles that I've, you know, been dabbling in, um, where people will say, "Well, I don't get my information from a book. I channel my information, and my information comes straight from the source, and my," and that is wonderful. However, if that vessel that's channeling isn't pure and hasn't purified the ego, that vessel hasn't shed the idea that
Mhm,
they're right and everyone else is wrong, then the information that is coming through the filter of an ego. And while that's great, it's not a place that should we should stop, right?
mhm,
I believe, and I remember having a conversation with this woman that we were trying to figure out this new kind of system in society and how it would work. And she was injecting her opinions and her thoughts and her feelings and not letting anybody else speak. And, she's right. And what I pointed out was it would be very difficult to create something new if the power structure that you're coming from is still the same. That you're
mhm,
correct, somebody else is wrong, that your idea is better than somebody else's. You don't have an active listening muscle fully built. So I do think that while yes, we channel information and we get it from all different places, and I know you know this, we don't always get it from benevolent energy. We also get it from malevolent energy. So the discernment muscle has got to be really well developed in order to know where we're
mhm,
getting our information
mhm,
because there's a lot of different interference with all different kinds of energies that are here. All this to say that getting the information solely from one source, intuition or intellect, doesn't that's why I say it doesn't breed wisdom. Wisdom is the marriage of both. Understanding that you're getting it from that intellectual place, you're taking it in through, your resonance to decide whether or not that information sits with you or not.
Mhm,
You're using your discernment muscle to decide, is this a heavily agended thing? Does it bring light and love and peace, or is there a more negative element to it that I need to be paying attention to?
mhm,
Because again, if I'm involved in a spiritual anything that is putting someone else down, elevating me, putting me in, right? I'm not quite being influenced by the energy of love. So, all of these things are things that I feel we are here to learn. And maybe the major question I ask myself is, what is it all for? Um, I I don't think I've gotten to that yet. I've gotten to the part where I know that we are supposed to merge with Earth. We are supposed to go to that nature. We are part of nature. We
mhm,
go through the same cycles that animals go through, that plants go through, that the cosmos go through, because it's all interconnected. So I'm with you when you say that it's not just a one stop shop.
yeah,
We're getting, yeah, that we're getting it from all these different places, and we're bringing it and we're filtering it through the body, which again, I have learned that the body does have to be purified in that way. We have to clean our energy
mhm,
systems. We have to clear out the Buddhists. Part of the practice of Buddhism is non-attachment, removing quieting the monkey mind, being able to look at things objectively instead of subjectively and without judgment, shame, guilt, etc. So I that's why I do feel all of these things come around to the same thing, which is what your book talks about, is the understanding that you are the God. You are that energy. Once you have,
yeah.
right,
We are
purified that
we are
vessel.
I take I don't tend to be a fundamentalist, in the sense of what we commonly define as fundamentalists in religion, people who take these things literally and all that. But I take very seriously, uh, the phrase that we were created in the image and likeness of God. I take that very seriously. We are co-creations of God, which allow us to co-create with God. But not a but something you said in terms of, and this kinda comes from interfaith, studies, and that is the idea that, because we go through this in interfaith training, this idea that I remember once, um, saying as a student, saying to, one of our deans, one of our directors, "Well, then would you define interfaith then as," or I decided we should define interfaith as, uh, that we consider all religions, all paths to God to be valid. And he basically said to me, "Who are you to decide that?" And man, he was absolutely right. He was absolutely right. And boy, did I switch my thinking on that to, we must respect each other. That's why, as you said, it's a philosophy, not a religion. Whereas I said, we must respect each individual's right to pursue their own journey to a higher spirit without judgment. And I always add, provided that they are not violent, either spiritually or physically in any way. And that's essentially, for me, that's the interfaith, philosophy. I would also add, and this leads me down another little road. Um, I know I've quoted to you what's called the Wiccan Reed, which is, "And it harm no one, do what you will." And that part, "and it harm no one," and that's why, by the way, I think the intellect, the ability to read, which opens the doors to everything, is is crucial. Go back to the New Testament. Go back to the Gita, to go back to, the Quran. Read the text. See what it really says. Don't be listening to people who are quoting this and quoting that and whatever. Read the text for yourself. get back to the basics, get back to the roots. Because what I get from it, and this is something you brought up that I wanted to address. If you are interfering in any way with somebody else's spiritual development, then you're doing something wrong.
Mm,
It's pretty
yeah.
that gets pretty complicated when you think about it. But but each of us needs to be free to pursue our own spiritual development. And
Yeah.
there's a whole nother conversation that we won't have today, but that actually is how, in my mind, religion affects politics. Because
Yeah.
we've chosen as a society to use politics, which is fine, to use politics as a collective way to take care of each other, hopefully. And
Mm.
by taking care of each other, we help each other with our own spiritual development, if that makes sense, if that's not too
No,
obscure.
it does make sense. No, it makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because you're you make a good point about all these different religions and to not allow one or the other to interfere in the spiritual evolution of a human being.
Mhm,
Although historically human beings have interfered in the evolution, ascension, etc. of other human beings. Um, One of the things you said at the very, very top was about the pagan religion, which was wiped out during the Crusades, along with the Gnostics, the Celtics. Like there's always been a suppression of certain information and
mhm.
knowledge if it doesn't suit power structure, etc. Which I do think one day you and I will come back and we will delve into that. Because where politics and religion intersect, if it is not, it
Mhm.
intersects on both sides of the polarity spectrum. And so what how we deal with that and then how that affects our society, it's obviously too big a conversation for this, but we are definitely coming back to that. And I do want to say something, my own story. When I was getting confirmed, and that the lunatic father that I have, the biological one, was standing next to me and the priest, and I said something to my mom because as a kid I didn't really understand the religious stuff as much. I loved angels, which we know, but all this I personally found the energy very low and heavy, and I didn't understand why. I didn't really have words for it, but now at 46 I do. Um anyway, the priest, and I remember he's so tall and in his regal little outfit. And I said something like, "I don't wanna go in," something to my father. And he said to me, "Oh, you can't speak to your parent like that, God doesn't like that, and, but don't worry because I'll pray for your sins." And and he went in this whole thing. And I looked up at him, and this was at 7, and I said, "I don't need you to talk to God. I'll talk to him myself." And, my lunatic father started laughing, right? Which, he is so on brand for him, right? Especially what he turned out to be with the Hinduism and all the other stuff. But something in that moment, and I always have that flash of myself being so like, don't you tell me that I need to go through you to talk to the source that lives within me. So before we go, is there anything in that vein, because your book, again, I am God and so are you, right? That you would say to anybody out there who is seeking, looking, unsure, any advice that you would give them, anything that you would want to offer them to help them take that next step on their journey?
What comes to mind immediately, so I'll take it as the Holy Spirit inspiration. Maybe I'd have a different answer if I thought about it more. Trust yourself. If you're on the journey, if you are sincerely on the journey, to me, that already means your intentions are pretty good. So what we talked about before in terms of your own ego, I don't like the word suppressing that, but being careful of what's ego driven. Uh, But I think if you choose to go on the journey, for whatever reason, but if you choose to go on the journey, I think you're probably in a pretty good place. So trust yourself more than necessarily trusting guys like me. But I would say me you can trust because I'm never going to say to somebody, "You must, you have
Right.
to," because that's not where I'm coming from. But the minute,
Yeah.
I wrote something years ago, uh, and I can't even remember the context in which I wrote it, but I do remember saying, and it was a little vignette, the idea of the walking the journey, right, on a road. We always use that. And by the way, I've completely changed that, and someday we'll talk about why. But I like to use the word quest now a lot more than journey. But at any rate, this sort of imagined picture of somebody on a journey and walking with you a little while. Let me walk with you for a little while, and we'll talk. But when you've had enough of me, when you've gotten what you need, I'll leave, or you can walk away. We don't need to make the whole
Mhm.
journey together because maybe somebody else is going to join you along the journey. But the minute somebody
Yeah.
says to you when they join you on the journey, "Oh, this is the way. You have to come this way, or else you'll get lost," that's the person to run away from.
I love that you say this because there is a book by Paulo Coelho,
Mhm.
the warrior, the spiritual warrior, and there's this passage in there where he says, "You will tire, you will weaken." You know, the devil says, oh man, I'm going to quote this wrong, but the gist of it is the devil says, "Let me help you," right? And the uh, angel comes and says, "You will tire, you will weaken, etc. You will be down." And the angel says, "I will help you." And I think it's a really interesting way to say it because in order for someone "I will help you," meaning that you are in the power position to take on or to dictate. Whereas if somebody's saying, "Let me help you," they are imposing their power on you.
Mhm.
"I will help you" means you tell me, "I will help you. I will come to your aid." "Let me help you" is "let me do it for you. Let me." And there is
How
an
can I
incredible
help?
distinction.
How can I help you?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I that always stuck out to me because there is nuance there.
Mhm.
And I love what you say about, no one should be dictating your road or showing you which way to go. They should be accompanying you for a
Right.
season or a moment, and then you either, you diverge or you go a little further. And I just do want to go back to one other thing you said about being careful what other people quote or say to you. Um, Friends, so many quotes are misappropriated to Buddha, to Einstein. I've seen Schopenhauer quotes, with Einstein, and these are people who identify as self-proclaimed geniuses that use these quotes that are actually not attributed to the people that they say. So really use your discernment and do your research. And for those that are looking to Buddhism, the Lotus Sutra, that's where you need to go
Mhm.
for Buddhism. There's a ton of books, the Buddha traveled here and the Buddha traveled there,
Sure.
and the Dalai Lama, and it's all wonderful. But if you are actually looking for the practice, you want to go to the Lotus Sutra. Um, Dad, when can we expect your book, this wonderful masterpiece that you have been carefully co-creating, for the past few years?
Hopefully sometime in the spring. Hopefully I'll be able to, shop it around and get it published sometime in I would say late spring, I hope, of obviously 2026.
Is there any place people can contact you or connect with you if they want to learn more or get in touch with you?
Well, it's interesting you ask me that because I've been I've been through a number of phases as you well know, not only in my larger life, but along my spiritual journey. And I am uh, sincerely hoping to launch a new ministry online in February of next year called Open Table, um, an interfaith approach to Christ consciousness. So hopefully that will be, and maybe you'll have me back then and we can talk a little bit about that. So
Yes. No, I'm definitely going to have you back. Dad, this has been a really great conversation. Thank you so much for
me too.
joining me. And, we look forward to your book. We look forward to your ministry and all the other wonderful things that you're going to bring into this world. Thanks so much again.
Okay. Thank you. Take care. See you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you so much for joining me on Call Cut with Angelique. New episodes drop every Friday. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. And remember, folks, no matter what life gives you, you must always keep shining.